Hello everybody, welcome to Dirty Air. I'm your host Alex Lambert, and let's talk about the Martinsville Night Race. And I think me and many other NASCAR fans can agree that it was not the most exciting race last night in Martinsville, Virginia, in the hills of Virginia. Pretty disappointing race, especially for Martinsville standards. You know, when you go to certain tracks like maybe Pocono, for example, or even Dover, for example, you don't expect extreme action-packed racing, a great finish. That's not really the expectations for tracks like that. But when you go to Martinsville and you go to these short tracks, you expect action-packed racing. There's a reason it's called the Half Mile of Mayhem, because Martinsville historically has created memorable moments, aggressive racing, running into drivers, a couple of wrecks every now and then, a lot of spins, a lot of cautions. Last few races, I believe, had well over 10 cautions. And tonight we had 2 cautions for a contract, and they were somewhat questionable cautions. Not really sure if they even needed to throw a caution for one of those incidents, at least, of the 2. I think the incident at the end of the race with 7 to go with Gilliland slapping the wall was kind of justified for a caution. At the end of the race with 7 laps to go. But the race overall just was not that entertaining. We only had one pass for the lead, and that was under caution coming off of pit road. That was William Byron passing Chase Elliott going into stage 3. So Chase Elliott dominates the first half of the race, wins the first stage, dominates stage 2. William Byron then takes that lead about a little bit past the halfway point of the race, and from that point on, William Byron dominates the second half of the race and wins the race, and nobody could really touch him. William Byron was fast. I guess the only good silver lining about this race is the most deserving car and team did win. William Byron led most of the laps in the race, led essentially the whole second half of the race, and did get the victory. So that was somewhat good to see. The most deserving car, I guess, did win the race, but that's just not the type of racing we're used to seeing, and not the type of racing we like seeing at Martinsville. No passing, not only for the lead. We have had races in the past where there's not a whole lot of passes for the lead, and that's sometimes okay every now and then. You're going to get that every now and then, every few weeks or so. You'll have a race, or, maybe every couple races a season, you're going to get a couple races where the guy dominates the race. But throughout the entire field, there was very little passing. Every now and then, after a long run, Kyle Busch's car would die, and he would lose like 10 spots, or a little bit less than 10. Chastain worked his way up through the field. It took Logano and his teammates the entire race to work their way up through the field, and then Logano ultimately ended up getting to second. It took him the whole race to work his way up to that point. And then Chase Elliott was one of those who led the first half, and then he faded going into the second half of the race. He kind of dropped off like Kyle Busch did. He ended up finishing 10th after dominating the first half of the race. So, like I said, very uneventful race. I don't know what the reasoning for that was. That was kind of an unexpected event. We've had great races with the next-gen car all season long. The road courses have been great. The mile and a halves have been great. The super speedways, Atlanta and Daytona, have been very entertaining to watch. And then Martinsville was just kind of uncharacteristically dead. No action whatsoever. Not sure what NASCAR could do to fix that. Every now and then you're going to get a race that's not action-packed, not extremely insane, not a crazy finish. That's okay, but the concern I had was there was a lot of talk of cars stalling out. They interviewed Ryan Blaney, they interviewed Logano, a couple other drivers. They said the cars are stalling out. That's when there's a concern, because if you go to any race that there's cars stalling out, if you go back to the mile and a half package, the mile and a half races for the last few years before the next gen era, where we were racing 550 horsepower, the car stalled out and you had bad racing. The last few years at Michigan, you have an example of that. The race was terrible at Michigan the last few years. This year it should be a little bit better with the higher horsepower, with the next gen car. But over the last few years at Michigan, the cars stalled out when you got behind another car. And from what I heard from the drivers, I was a bit concerned with cars stalling out. That is not good. You don't need cars stalling out at any racetrack. That takes away driver talent. That takes away entertainment. That takes away everything, because you're essentially just stuck behind the guy in front of you. And you could definitely see that. And even drivers like Blaney and Logano said, we stalled out so bad you couldn't even get up to the car to bump them. And if you did bump them, they didn't bump up out the way, as you saw in the final lap with Joey Logano and William Byron. So certainly upsetting. Like I said, the reasoning for it, I'm not sure. Was the lower horsepower. If you remember, last year, the short track races, the tracks under a mile long or under 1.3 miles long, had 750 horsepower. Now they have 670. That's a pretty noticeable drop. That's 80 horsepower lower. That's definitely a bit noticeable, and that might need to be considered. That might need to be looked into by NASCAR, just to make sure that's not the reason that the cars are stalling out. I've also heard that that weather was had a huge factor in it, that the tires weren't laying down any rubber, so there was less tire wear, less places to find grip. You couldn't find grip on the high side. It was just a one-groove racetrack, which is kind of, Martinsville was kind of turning into a two-groove racetrack, uncharacteristically, but over the last few years, that was kind of Martinsville was turning into a two-groove racetrack. Last night, it was a one-groove racetrack. You just rode the bottom, stayed in the same position. So yeah, that definitely disappointed. Could be the tire. It was cold. I mean, it was really cold. It's uncharacteristically cold for Martinsville race, even in April at night. I believe it's going to be in like the 60s tonight at Martinsville, and it was cold. I was at the race. We had the rain delay to start the race, which was obviously, whenever you have a rain delay, that kills the mood. We had to sit in the rain. It snowed on us for a little bit. That shows you how cold it was. We got snowed on at the race, and then it was just freezing cold. It was the low 40s all night. It might even got below 40. It might even got in the high 30s before the end of the race. It was freezing. I was in the stands. It was cold. At least it was a 400 lap race and not a 500 lap race. I don't think I could have done 100 more laps. It was freezing cold in the grandstands. The racing wasn't that great. We had the rain delay, the long hour and a half waiting around, walking around the track, waiting for that to end. It was just kind of a long race. But nonetheless, I'm still glad I win. I'm still glad I had a good time at the race. But just disappointed. And they talked to Austin Dillon, and he kind of mentioned that maybe the weather had something to do with it. There was not a lot of tire being laid down, rubber being laid down, and that could also go with Goodyear has made harder tires to where the tires might not wear as quick. So maybe NASCAR needs to look at that, and Goodyear needs to look into that as well. But besides the uneventfulness of the race, let's talk about William Byron. William Byron is the first multi-time winner in the year 2022. That shocked me. I don't think going into the season anybody would have guessed that William Byron would have been the driver to do it. Obviously, going into this year, he's only had 2 career wins. And then, of course, this year, he bumps that up to 4 already with the win at Atlanta and then the win at Martinsville. That's a big step up for that team. They've been kind of looked at as the 4th driver at Hendrick. They've been looked at as, not the best team at Hendrick. The 24 team, since Jeff Gordon left, has been known as kind of that 4th driver at Hendrick, that 4th race car. Well, they have the most wins so far this year with the Hendrick teams. The only driver right now without a win at Hendrick is Chase Elliott. So obviously, that doesn't hurt me too much as a Kyle Busch fan. But so Chase Elliott right now obviously going to be looking into that. But it does step William Byron up. He's obviously a good driver. He obviously knows how to fix the car up, how to set these race cars up better, especially at Martinsville. The crew chief, the driver, obviously were communicating perfectly to build the fastest race car on track, the dominant race car on track. The driver has a lot to do with that. The driver has to put in the input, has to tell them what he needs to run the racetrack, and he did that, so he was able to get the win. So congratulations to Byron on his 4th career win. Let's see. I'm hearing talks that he might be a championship contender. I don't see why not. He's up front every week. Every type of racetrack is up front. I know he won at Atlanta, which is a super speedway style race, but he put himself in position to win it. And he's up front every week. I mean, he's in the top 3 consistently, running in the top 5 consistently. So William Byron is championship 4 threat. I don't see why not. He's one of the most consistent cars on the racetrack. He has the most wins so far this season at a short track and a big track. So I wouldn't count him out. Definitely wouldn't count him out. Let's kind of go through the lineup here, the top 10 finishing order. Like I said, William Byron did get the win. Joey Logano ended up finishing 2nd. He was one of those drivers that kind of worked his way up through the field. It took him the whole race after he qualified in the back to get up to 2nd, and he gave Byron the bumper at the end, but it didn't do a whole lot. Then we had Austin Dillon finishing 3rd. Another one of those drivers used a good pit cycle, used a good pit strategy to kind of work his way up there on the final restart to give him a chance. He even said he messed up on the restart, shifting the gears. And that, by the way, that also could be another reason. That's something we've never seen either, is shifting gears at Martinsville. That could have been another reason for a bit of a uneventful Martinsville race. We had Austin Dillon finishing in the 3rd position, Ryan Blaney finishing 4th. Another one, all the Penske cars really started out in the back. They qualified terrible, and then were able to work their way back up to the front. So Ryan Blaney working his way up to get 4th. Ross Chastain started 27th. He was able to work his way up, push his way through. Once again, took him the whole race to get there, but he was able to get up to 5th position. Actually, Kurt knocked Kurt Busch out of the way. Kurt Busch, who's in 6th, he knocked him out of the way. And apparently there were some words exchanged there, is what I've heard. And Ross Chastain finishing 5th. That rounds out your top 5. And you got Kurt Busch finishing 6th. And that 2311 Racing team. Kurt Busch has come to 2311 Racing and has really been doing very well. In the top 10 consistently. Got a couple of top 5 finishes. So Kurt Busch definitely kind of stepping up that team as well. Those Toyotas over there, 2311. We'll be interested to see if he could maybe gain a little bit more. Maybe try to get some wins. We know the Toyotas are a little bit slow right now. But we'll see if Kurt Busch can continue to get a little bit better. Maybe top 3s, maybe some wins coming up in the future. By the way, he was the highest finishing Toyota last night at Martinsville. Kyle Busch, the second highest finishing Toyota, ended up finishing 7th. Now, Kyle Busch was that race car, like I said, throughout the night on the long runs, the extremely long runs, his car just, you talk about fading, his car died. I mean, he would be 7th or 8th in the race, and the next thing you know, you look and he's 16th, 17th. I'm like, great. So there he goes, and then was actually able to, on the final caution, going into an overtime finish, a 2-lap to go finish, green, white, checkered. Kyle Busch actually came down pit road. He was in like 9th. I was like, what? What is he doing? He's going to go to pit road and lose position. He was 17th on the last 2 laps with those much fresher tires, and this is much fresher tires than everybody else. I mean, probably 50, 60, maybe even more laps on everybody else's tires. Kyle Busch was able to fly right through them all on the high line. The tires were so fresh and was able to go up and get 7th. So that's not an indicator that the tire wear was that important. It was just Kyle Busch had way fresher tires than everybody else. I mean, a whole nother level. Eric Almirola and in his final season did get a 8th place finish, so good for him. His teammate Chase Briscoe ended up finishing 9th, and Chase Elliott, like I said, dominated the first part of the race, ended up finishing in the 10th position. So obviously, not a whole lot of excitement at Martinsville. I was glad I went. I don't regret going. It was not the best experience. It was really cold. There was a lot of long lines for the concession stands, which I think is a concern that NASCAR needs to address. Really long lines at the concession stands, very slow lines at the concession stands. Not the best fan appreciation experience, but it was cold. It was snowing on us. It was a rain delay. Race was kind of boring. But of course, it was a NASCAR race, so I still had a good time, and I'm still glad I went. But that's it. That's all there's to talk about after Martinsville. Bristol Dirt next Sunday night. It'll be interesting to see how that works. Hopefully, it's a little bit better than last year. And I think Bristol Dirt could be a very exciting race. We'll have to see with these next-gen cars if they'll be able to put on a good dirt show. Kyle Busch doesn't seem to think so. But we'll see. We'll see if he's wrong. And hopefully he is wrong in that instance. And hopefully it is a good dirt show. So tune in to Dirty Air next week. Like and subscribe if you like the video. I do appreciate those of you that have already subscribed. And I hope you keep tuning in. That's it. And of course, let's get rowdy.